The cold wind slammed against the windows as the sound of a door slamming echoed through the empty apartment. Her heart pounded in her chest, a sharp pain slicing through her as his betrayal played over in her mind. "How could he?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the dark room for some sign of him. He had promised this would be different, that he would be the one to stay. But he had lied. She felt the sting of rejection, the weight of the past 5 years collapsing onto her shoulders. As she sank to her knees, her tears fell freely, each drop a testament to the love she had given, only to have it torn away. She had given everything to him, only for him to shatter her like glass. The silence around her seemed endless, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic outside. But in this moment, she was alone, completely alone. The silence felt suffocating, but even more so was the overwhelming emptiness that filled every corner of the apartment. She stared at the walls, wondering how long it would take to forget the man who had promised forever, but left her in a moment of weakness. Each second ticked by with an unbearable heaviness as she wondered where it all went wrong. Was she too trusting, too naive to believe in something so fragile? She had spent years building something with him, something she thought was worth holding on to. But now, all she had left were memories that hurt too much to keep alive, but were too precious to completely erase. The sound of her phone ringing shattered the silence, the sudden noise pulling her back to reality. She hesitated for a moment before answering, already knowing who it was. His name blinked on the screen, like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. It was him, the man who had betrayed her. "Why now?" she whispered under her breath, her hand trembling slightly as she pressed the phone to her ear. His voice came through, smooth and confident, but beneath it she could hear the hesitation. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to end like this," he said. But it didn't matter. The damage was done, and no amount of apologies could undo the betrayal. She had loved him with everything she had, but now she was left holding the shattered pieces of their relationship. She let the silence linger after his words. Every apology he uttered only deepened the wound. "I don't need your apologies," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You chose to leave, and now you want to come back when it's convenient for you." She felt her heart racing again, the anger bubbling up. He tried to explain himself, but his words seemed empty now. The man she had loved, the one she had trusted with her heart, was no longer the man on the other end of the line. Her eyes closed as a tear slipped down her cheek. She had been foolish, believing in a love that was only one-sided. She took a deep breath, and then with finality, she ended the call. There was no more to say. Her love for him was buried now, and the only thing left was moving forward, alone. After hanging up, she sat down on the couch, the weight of the moment crushing her. Her heart felt like it was breaking all over again, but this time she knew it was different. She had cried for him enough. The man who never truly saw her, the one who took her love for granted. He had left her once, and now he expected to come back into her life as if nothing had happened. But there was nothing left to salvage. Her phone lay on the table, its screen now dark, and she stared at it, willing herself not to pick it up again. She would not allow him to have this power over her any longer. She had to reclaim herself, to rebuild from the pieces he left behind. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to start anew. Nia stared at him across the cafe table, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and longing. She wanted to believe in his words, in the sincerity behind his voice, but the pain from the past still lingered. "Why did you come back now?" she asked, her voice trembling. It was hard to suppress the emotions that had been building up for days, weeks even. Every part of her wanted to scream, but instead, she forced herself to stay calm, her eyes never leaving his. He had been gone for so long, and now he was sitting here, asking for a chance to make things right. But could she trust him again? Was there even a chance that he hadn't changed? The silence between them grew heavy, and she felt the weight of every unspoken word pressing on her chest. "All I need is a chance, Nia," he said, his voice soft but filled with urgency. "I know I hurt you, but I want to make things right. I've spent the last year realizing what I lost. I can't keep living with this regret." His words hung in the air like an offering, but Nia felt her heart harden at the thought of giving him another chance. The trust they once had was shattered, and no amount of apologies could fix that. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking in a steady breath. "You can't just come back and expect things to be the same," she replied, her voice steady despite the pain in her chest. "You don't get to undo the past." She wished it were that simple, to just forgive and move on. But it wasn't. And no matter how much he wanted to fix things, she wasn't sure if she could ever allow him back into her heart. Nia stood up, her chair scraping against the floor with an unsettling sound. She couldn't sit there any longer, couldn't pretend that his apology meant everything. "You don't get to just show up and expect me to forget," she said, her voice breaking. He followed her movement with his eyes, his face a mask of guilt and frustration. "I know I can't undo the past," he admitted, "but I need you to know how sorry I am, how much you mean to me." Nia walked toward the window, staring out at the bustling city, trying to steady her breath. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the windowsill as tears welled up in her eyes. It felt like she was standing on the edge of something uncertain, something that could either tear her apart or set her free. Her love interest reached out to her, his voice softer now. "Nia, please." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't live with myself knowing I hurt you." His words hit her like a punch to the gut, but she refused to let him see her weakness. "You already walked away once," she replied, her voice cool but sharp. "What makes you think this time will be different?" He took a step closer, his face desperate. "Because I've changed, Nia. I'm not the same person who hurt you." She stared at him for a long moment, feeling the weight of his plea. But deep down, she knew that change was a long road, one that she wasn't sure she was willing to walk again. Nia's heart was racing, but she couldn't let herself get swept away by the flood of emotions. "You've had your chance," she said, her voice steady but firm. "And you wasted it. I won't let you keep coming back into my life causing chaos." Her words cut through the silence like a knife, and she could see the hurt flash across his face. But she didn't feel sorry for him. She had to let him go, even if it hurt. "I need to move on, and that means leaving you behind," she continued, her breath shaky but her resolve clear. He opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. "Goodbye." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the cafe, a man broken by his own mistakes. Nia couldn't breathe, her pulse racing as the truth came crashing down on her. She had suspected something for weeks, but hearing it from him made it feel too real. "You're lying," she said, her voice shaking. "You're telling me that all of this, everything we've built, was a lie?" He looked at her, eyes filled with pain, but Nia couldn't stop the flood of anger that was rising within her. "How could you keep this from me?" She turned away, pacing across the room as his silence echoed like a guilty confession. It wasn't just the affair. It was the deception, the complete disregard for her trust. "All this time you've been hiding this, pretending everything was fine," she continued, her voice growing colder. "And now you expect me to believe that this wasn't all a game to you?" His voice was barely a whisper, but the words cut through the silence like a blade. "I never meant for it to happen," he confessed, guilt written all over his face. Nia's heart shattered as she realized the full scope of his betrayal. "So what? It just happened? You thought I wouldn't find out?" Her fists clenched at her sides as her voice grew louder. "What kind of man does this? What kind of person hides something like that from the person they claim to love?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The truth was too heavy to be excused. She shook her head, taking a step back, feeling the world spin around her. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I even want to know." Nia stepped back, her body trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You had every chance to be honest with me," she said, her voice rising. "But you chose to lie. You chose to keep me in the dark. Do you know how that feels?" She could barely breathe, the weight of the betrayal suffocating her. "You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choices, and now I have to deal with the aftermath." Her love interest reached out, his hand trembling as if he wanted to touch her. But she stepped back, holding up a hand to stop him. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You don't get to touch me, not after this." Her words hung in the air, and the silence that followed was deafening. The man she loved, the man she had trusted, was no longer the same person in her eyes. Her love interest finally spoke, his voice low and filled with sorrow. "I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen." But Nia was done. "It doesn't matter anymore," she interrupted, her voice cold. "You've hurt me more than I ever thought possible." Her heart was still racing, but she forced herself to be strong, to not give in to the ache that threatened to consume her. "I gave you everything," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "And you repaid me with lies and deceit." She paused, taking a slow, deliberate breath. "You're not the person I thought you were." The words stung, and as much as she wanted to hold on to the memories of their love, she knew deep down that it was over. Nia walked away from him, each step heavy with the finality of her decision. "Goodbye," she whispered, the words barely audible. Her heart was breaking, but she knew this was the only way to move forward. "I can't keep doing this to myself." She reached for the door handle, the cool metal against her fingers grounding her in reality. "I deserve better than this." With one last glance at him, she stepped out into the night, the door closing softly behind her. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the final note in the symphony of their shattered love. And though she didn't know what the future held, she knew she would never look back. Nia's chest tightened as she faced him once again, the truth finally settling in her bones. "You were right," she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet storm. "You've changed, but it's not for the better." Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no doubt. He had lied to her, betrayed her, and now she was looking at a man who no longer felt familiar. "I thought I could forgive you," she continued. "But I can't. You broke me in ways I didn't even know were possible." She took a step back, feeling the weight of her words. "And I can't let you keep doing this to me. You don't get to keep coming in out of my life like this." She was done. She had given him everything, and he had taken it all, leaving nothing in return but ashes. "I didn't want it to end like this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. His eyes bore into hers, desperate for a reaction, but Nia's heart had already closed. "You've already made it end," she responded, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I gave you chances, I believed in you, and you destroyed that. There's no going back now." His face twisted with pain, but Nia couldn't summon any sympathy. "I don't want your apologies," she said, her gaze unwavering. "You've lost the right to ask for forgiveness. You don't get to hurt me anymore." She took a deep breath, feeling the release of all the pent-up anger and sadness. "This is the last time you'll see me like this." "You don't get it," he said, his voice breaking. "I never stopped loving you." But Nia's heart had hardened, her trust shattered beyond repair. "Your love isn't enough anymore," she said quietly, her eyes never leaving his. "You had the chance to show me that and you blew it." His face paled, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy blanket. "What do you want from me, Nia?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She stood in silence for a moment, the pain of the past overwhelming her. "I want you to leave," she said simply, her tone final. "And never come back." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers, but Nia remained unmoved. "Please, just give me one more chance," he pleaded. "I can change. I will prove it to you." But the words felt empty to Nia, a hollow promise that she had heard too many times before. "No more chances," she replied, her voice cold as ice. "You've exhausted all of them." She could see the pain in his eyes, but it wasn't enough to make her falter. "I deserve better than this," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I deserve someone who won't break me, someone who won't lie to me." With that, she turned to walk away, feeling the weight of her decision settling in her chest. Nia opened the door, her heart racing, but this time it was not from fear. "Goodbye," she whispered, the words heavy with finality. She stepped into the night, the cool air hitting her face like a rebirth. For the first time in what felt like ages, she felt free. No more lies, no more heartbreak. She was walking away from the past, stepping into a future where she could finally heal. The door clicked softly behind her, the sound like the closing of a chapter she would never revisit. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but she knew that she was strong enough to face it alone. Nia stood by the window, the morning sun filtering through the curtains, casting a soft light on the quiet room. She hadn't expected to feel this peaceful after everything, but here she was. The weight of her past seemed lighter now, like it had been lifted by the simple act of moving on. Her heart still carried the scars of betrayal, but it was no longer held hostage by the pain. "I've learned to forgive, not for you, but for me," she whispered, her voice strong but gentle. "I deserve peace." She took a slow, steady breath, her eyes closing as she embraced the serenity of the moment. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she was okay with that. Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting the silence. She picked it up without hesitation, her heart doing a small knowing leap as she saw who it was. Her best friend's name appeared on the screen. "You okay?" the message read, and Nia smiled to herself. "I'm better than okay," she typed back, her fingers moving quickly as she spoke the truth she had long been too afraid to admit. "I'm finally free. I've let go of all the things that held me back. It's time to live again." A moment of silence followed as she stared at the screen, almost in disbelief at the peace she now felt. She could feel the weight of her own strength, the power in knowing she could stand tall, no matter what. Later that day, Nia found herself at the coffee shop she used to visit with him, the one place they had once shared so many memories. The memories weren't gone, but they didn't hurt as much now. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the quiet. The world continued to spin, but it no longer felt like it was spinning out of control. "I thought I would never get past this," she reflected aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "But here I am. Stronger than I ever knew I could be." She looked out the window, watching the people pass by, a smile tugging at her lips as she realized she had moved on, and in doing so, had found herself again. Later that evening, Nia stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the city below. The lights sparkled like tiny stars scattered across the darkened landscape, each one a symbol of the life she was now embracing. She had taken back control of her story, and it felt like a new chapter was beginning. "I've learned that letting go doesn't mean forgetting," she whispered to herself. "It means giving yourself permission to live again." The night air was cool and comforting as it brushed against her skin, and for the first time in a long while, Nia felt at peace with herself, ready to face whatever came next. As she stood there, Nia realized that she had come full circle. The pain she had carried for so long was no longer a burden, but a lesson. "I am who I am because of everything I've been through," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet strength. "And I am enough." She smiled to herself, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The night stretched out before her, endless and full of possibility. "I'm ready," she thought. "Ready to live. Ready to love again." With that, she stepped back into her apartment, the door closing softly behind her. The future was waiting, and Nia was ready to face it. The sound of Nia's phone buzzing broke the silence in her apartment. Her heart skipped as she saw his name flash on the screen. She hesitated before answering, a weight settling in her chest. Why now, she thought. He hadn't reached out in weeks. She took a deep breath and answered the call, her voice calm, but her hands slightly trembling. "Nia, we need to talk." His voice came through, rough and filled with regret. Her heart pounded again, but this time there was no anger, only a strange sense of detachment. "What's done is done," she replied softly, her voice a stark contrast to the chaos that had once ruled her heart. "There's nothing left to say." She listened to his broken words, but inside she knew the truth. It was too late. The story they had tried to write together was over. The conversation continued, his words tumbling out, each one a desperate plea for forgiveness. "Nia, I've changed. I realize now what I lost," he said, his voice breaking. "You were everything to me." She closed her eyes, shaking her head, but the anger that had once bubbled inside her was gone. It had been replaced by something more profound: acceptance. "I can't keep going back to what we were," she replied softly. "I'm not the same person anymore, and neither are you. We've both moved on." There was a brief silence, and for a moment, Nia could hear only the sound of her own breath. She didn't feel sadness. She didn't feel rage. She felt peace, the kind that came from knowing she had made the right decision. When she hung up the phone, Nia sat in silence for a moment, staring at the now darkened screen. Her thoughts lingered for only a brief second on the man she had once loved, but the emotion was fleeting. "I did what I had to do," she thought to herself, the truth settling into her bones. "I loved him, but I can't let him destroy me anymore." She rose from the couch, walking over to the window, her eyes drawn to the soft light of the moon outside. The night sky felt endless, and for the first time in a long while, Nia felt small in the best way possible, insignificant in the vastness of the world, but free. She was no longer burdened by the past, no longer defined by someone else's choices. It was a new beginning. Nia stepped away from the window, her heart calm, her mind at ease. She walked into her bedroom and sat at the edge of her bed, looking at her reflection in the mirror. There were no tears, no longing for the past, only a quiet resolve. "I've learned to let go," she whispered to herself. "And I've learned to forgive, not for him, but for me." She smiled faintly at her reflection, realizing that she was whole again. "This is who I'm meant to be," she thought, strong, independent, and at peace. She took a deep breath, letting go of everything that had once weighed her down, finally ready to move forward with her life. The phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't him. It was a message from her best friend, checking in as always. "How are you really doing?" the text read. Nia smiled, her heart light as she typed her reply. "I'm doing just fine," she wrote. "Better than fine, actually. I'm happy." She set the phone down and stretched, the weight of her past fully behind her now. She had faced the hurt, confronted the heartbreak, and emerged stronger. There was nothing left to hold her back. "I'm ready for the future," she thought, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. With a final glance at the city through her window, she stepped away, ready to embrace whatever came next. Nia walked through the park, the soft breeze of the early morning brushing against her skin. She had spent years carrying the weight of her past, but now, she was ready to let it all go. As she walked, the rhythm of her steps seemed to match the peace she had found within. She stopped for a moment, taking in the beauty of the green space around her, and smiled to herself. "This is my life now," she whispered, "and I am in control." The journey had been long and painful, but in this moment, she realized that every step had been worth it. She had learned to love herself again, and no one could take that away from her. As Nia sat on a park bench, the memories of the past seemed like distant echoes. She thought about everything she had been through, the love she had lost, and the love she had found within herself. I used to think love meant never letting go," she reflected, her voice soft. "But now, I know that real love starts with loving yourself." She smiled, the thought bringing a sense of calm that she hadn't known before. Her heart was lighter, unburdened by regret. She was no longer waiting for someone to fix her. She had fixed herself. And that was enough. Later that day, Nia found herself walking down the same street where she had once met him. It used to be a place of memories, good and bad. But now, it felt like any other street, just a part of the world she lived in. "I've made peace with it all," she thought. "I've made peace with him, and most importantly, with myself." The city around her felt different, somehow. More vibrant, more alive. As she walked, she realized that this was the first time she had truly felt free, not just from him, but from the version of herself she had outgrown. She was finally who she was meant to be. That evening, Nia sat at her favorite cafe, sipping her coffee as she scrolled through her phone. A message from her best friend popped up, asking if she was ready for their upcoming weekend trip. Nia smiled, her heart full of excitement. "I'm more than ready," she typed back. For the first time in years, she felt like she was moving forward, not carrying the past with her. "I'm ready for all that's ahead." The message was a reminder that her life was her own now, and the adventures she was about to embark on were hers to define. As the day came to an end, Nia stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city. The sky was painted with shades of purple and orange, and the lights of the city twinkled below. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had come so far. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." She took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs. For the first time, she was truly ready to embrace the future, knowing that she had everything she needed inside of her.